Faisal Al-Rashid, the young Saudi billionaire, and Layla Kareem, his stunning bride, looked like the perfect couple on their lavish wedding night. But behind the gold chandeliers and flashing cameras, their fairy tale turned into a nightmare. Within hours, Layla was dead, and Faisal was at the center of a scandal that shocked the world. The Crime Scene presents a new page of crime, a new mystery, a new shock case. The day was painted like a fairy tale, dripping in gold and luxury, the kind of wedding people only see on magazine covers or celebrity gossip shows. A Saudi billionaire with pockets deeper than oil fields had just snagged himself a bride so breathtaking. Every guest swore she looked like she'd been sculpted by angels. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers, tables stacked with caviar, and champagne towers spilling over like liquid gold. Musicians played live, celebrities showed up dressed to kill, and every corner of the venue screamed excess. On Instagram, it looked flawless. Photos of the groom smiling like a king, the bride glowing in her designer gown worth more than most people's homes. The hashtags alone pushed the wedding into global trending charts, flooding timelines from New York to Dubai. To outsiders, this was the perfect blend of money, beauty, and power. But beneath the blinding lights and picture-perfect smiles, whispers stirred like smoke in the background. A few faces in the crowd looked too long at the bride, squinting like they recognized her from another life, a world far removed from diamond tiaras and private jets. Some leaned in close to friends, muttering about old rumors they'd heard, stories that didn't line up with the image now standing on stage. The groom didn't seem to notice, or maybe he didn't want to. He stood tall, soaking up every ounce of attention, every cheer and applause like it was his coronation night. Still, the atmosphere carried a strange undercurrent, the kind of tension no one could put their finger on, but everyone felt in their gut. The cameras couldn't capture it, but it was there, hidden behind champagne smiles and perfectly staged photos. And while the world saw the beginning of a fairy tale, the shadows behind the gold curtains told a much darker story waiting to come to light. Before she stepped into the spotlight as the billionaire's new wife, the bride lived a life that couldn't have been further from royalty. She came from a world where survival was the only priority, and every choice was about keeping the lights on and food on the table. She learned early how to hustle, how to charm her way into the right rooms, and how to reinvent herself when the past started catching up. By the time she met her future husband, she had already walked through doors that most high society women would never dare touch. There were nights where she dressed like she belonged among the rich and powerful, even when she was just borrowing luxury. She brushed shoulders with men who carried money and danger in the same pocket, and rumors circled her name in late-night conversations. A few photos snapped in the wrong places floated around in private circles, the kind that couldn't be wiped away no matter how much time passed. She thought she could bury that side of herself by moving fast, aiming higher, and never looking back. Meeting the billionaire felt like the jackpot she had been chasing. For the first time, she believed she could rewrite her story, erase the grit of her past, and step into a life of silk sheets and guarded estates. The wedding ring wasn't just a symbol of love. It was her ticket out, her golden parachute. Yet the ghosts of her past didn't vanish. A handful of people remembered, a handful of files remained, and the internet never truly forgets. Her new world was built on shaky ground, balanced between the glitter of her husband's fortune and the shadows she had tried so hard to escape. She didn't realize how quickly those shadows would come crashing back. The glittering haze of the wedding barely had time to settle before the cracks started showing. Behind closed doors, the billionaire wasn't celebrating his new life. He was scrolling, digging, hunting for answers he couldn't shake. In the age of screenshots and secret archives, nothing ever disappears, and what he found ripped the floor out from under him. Buried in shady forums and tucked away on encrypted drives were traces of the woman he had just promised forever to. Images, stories, names of places she had once been linked to, all piecing together a version of her he never imagined standing in white lace at the altar. For a man with limitless money and a name carved into business empires, reputation was everything. His pride was iron, his ego sharper than glass, and humiliation hit him harder than any business loss ever could. to discover that his perfect bride had lived a life so far from the image he built around her felt like betrayal carved into his skin. He wasn't just angry. He was seething, poisoned by the thought of being laughed at, whispered about, exposed as a fool in front of the very society he had conquered. The more he stared at the evidence, the more it twisted inside him, reshaping love into something darker. By the time the wedding guests had gone home and the last champagne glass was cleared, the fairy tale gloss had already peeled away. Their arrival at the penthouse suite was quiet on the surface, but the storm was already roaring inside him. Every step, every glance at her was like fuel poured on an open flame. The night wasn't about romance anymore. The fantasy he paid for had collapsed, and all that was left was his pride, his fury, and a bride who had no idea how quickly her new world was about to turn into a nightmare. The wedding night should have been a celebration, the start of a brand new chapter drenched in luxury and romance. But inside that penthouse suite, the atmosphere was thick with rage instead of love. The room, lined with marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, became the stage for something brutal. What started as tension snapped in an instant, and the billionaire's fury erupted like a storm no one could stop. He wasn't thinking about vows or promises anymore. He was thinking about pride, betrayal, and the shadows of her past that he couldn't erase. Neighbors on the upper floors would later claim they heard muffled sounds, thuds, crashes, the kind of noise that doesn't belong to a newlywed couple on their wedding night. Staff patrolling the hallway noticed the "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door, but even that didn't mask the chaos spilling through the walls. Expensive lamps shattered, crystal glasses broke, and luxury furniture was knocked over like it was made of cardboard. For hours, the violence unfolded behind that locked door, every second pushing the bride further away from survival. When silence finally settled over the suite, it was heavy and unnatural. The glow of the city lights poured into the room, illuminating a scene no one expected to find. The once radiant bride lay lifeless, her beauty erased under bruises and blood, her gown torn and stained beyond recognition. The billionaire, now calm, stood in the wreckage like a man who had destroyed not just his wife, but his entire future. The fairy tale had ended before it even began. By the time hotel staff entered the next morning, summoned by unanswered calls and unanswered knocks, the tragedy was complete. What they walked into wasn't the honeymoon of a golden couple. It was a crime scene soaked in horror. Money moves mountains, and with a fortune stacked higher than most nations' reserves, the billionaire wasted no time trying to bury what had just happened. The second he realized the magnitude of what he had done, his instincts shifted from rage to damage control. Calls were made in the dead of night. Private security teams swarmed the hotel, and cell phones were snatched from anyone who might have heard a sound. Staff members were summoned one by one, their silence purchased with envelopes so fat they could retire early. The official story was crafted on the spot. A tragic accident. Nothing more, nothing less. The suite was scrubbed clean by professionals who had done this kind of job before, erasing bloodstains from silk sheets and replacing broken glass with brand new crystal. Security footage mysteriously disappeared, and digital records were wiped like they never existed. Even the medical examiner was offered a deal, the kind that makes people forget what they've seen in exchange for financial freedom. To the outside world, the billionaire was determined to spin the night into a sorrowful tragedy, a freak accident that had stolen his new bride too soon. But not everyone could be bought. Among the staff was a young hotel maid who had stumbled into the aftermath before the cleanup crew fully worked their magic. What she saw that night was seared into her memory. Marks on the bride's body, the panic in the groom's eyes, the undeniable evidence of violence. When the payoff was slid across the table, she froze. She could have taken the money and disappeared, but guilt gnawed at her. She chose to hold on to the truth, quietly approaching investigators with what she knew. That single act shattered the billionaire's carefully constructed cover-up, cracking open the lies he had built with his endless wealth. The walls of silence began to crumble, and the crime he thought he had erased started crawling back into the light. Once the story hit the press, there was no turning back. The headlines were explosive, plastered across every front page and blaring from every news channel. Billionaire bride dies on wedding night wasn't just another scandal. It was global gossip gold. Reporters dug in like sharks, pulling apart every detail of the couple's life. Paparazzi camped outside the billionaire's estate, cameras flashing day and night, while tabloids pushed stories that mixed fact with rumor, making the tragedy sound even darker than it already was. The bride's past, once tucked away in shadows, got dragged into the spotlight with no mercy. Old photos resurfaced, online forums lit up, and strangers pieced together her life like detectives with too much time. Some called her a victim, while others painted her as a gold digger who got caught in a dangerous game. Meanwhile, the billionaire's reputation spiraled into freefall. Business partners backed away, investors yanked their money, and stock prices tied to his empire dipped overnight. His name, once untouchable, became toxic. Social media added gasoline to the fire. Hashtags demanding justice trended across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, reaching millions in hours. Videos breaking down the timeline of events racked up views in the millions, each creator adding their own spin to the story. The world wasn't just watching, they were judging, debating, and dissecting every move. Public opinion turned into a tidal wave, and for the first time, his money couldn't buy silence. The pressure on investigators skyrocketed as international media kept the case alive. Every leak, every whisper, became breaking news. The billionaire, once cloaked in power and privilege, now looked cornered, exposed under a microscope he couldn't control. What started as whispers at a wedding had transformed into a full-blown global scandal, and the man who once seemed untouchable was drowning in it. The trial unfolded like a blockbuster, cameras swarming every entrance of the courthouse, fans and critics screaming outside the gates as if it were a red carpet event. Inside, the billionaire sat stone-faced, flanked by lawyers who charged more per hour than most people earn in a year. The prosecution painted him as a violent monster driven by ego and rage, while his defense team spun tales of misunderstanding and twisted accidents. For weeks, the world was glued to updates, each testimony and leaked detail sparking heated debates online. The courtroom became entertainment, a stage where the fall of the untouchable elite played out in real time. At first, it seemed like money might once again bend the system in his favor. Witnesses changed their tone, experts contradicted themselves, and evidence vanished under suspicious circumstances. But then came the bombshell that flipped the entire case. A hallway surveillance camera the cleanup crew had overlooked. Grainy yet damning, it showed the billionaire storming into the suite with visible fury, a look that said everything without words. That clip spread like wildfire, impossible to spin, impossible to erase. The jury didn't take long after that. Guilty. The word echoed through the courtroom like a death sentence for his empire. He was stripped of his power, his assets frozen, and sentenced to years behind bars. The billionaire who once towered above society was reduced to an inmate number. His kingdom crumbled to dust. But the final twist came after the verdict, when investigators uncovered evidence that the bride had secretly booked a one-way flight under another name the very night she died. She had planned to leave, to vanish from the golden cage she had just entered. She never made it to that flight. The escape she dreamed of was stolen by the man who vowed to love her forever.